The chair recognizes the gentleman from Indiana.
Mr. Speaker, I also ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks and to include extraneous material on the subject of the bill under consideration.
Without objection, so ordered.
Mr. Speaker, some people may be wondering why we find ourselves here today. Some people may be confused as to why we're voting on a resolution to disapprove of the debt limit suspension 2 weeks after the fact. And some people may be asking why I introduced this resolution of disapproval on behalf of some people who voted yes and others who voted no to give the President the authority to suspend the debt limit. The answers to these questions are much simpler than they might appear. We're here today because the United States of America carries a debt load of over $17 trillion and counting. We're voting on this resolution today because this is the procedure that was put in place by the Senate when they crafted a package to end the government shutdown. Now, many of us voted for that Senate legislation largely because we didn't think it was responsible to risk defaulting on our national debt. However, I introduced this resolution, and a majority of House members will vote to disapprove because it's also not responsible to ignore the problems created by our long-term debt. Mr. Speaker, despite the fact that a large number in this body voted to avoid default, it would be a gross mischaracterization to say that we approve of a debt limit suspension, absent adoption of bold policy reforms that will set our nation on a sustainable fiscal trajectory. We must break the habit of negotiating these fiscal deals at the last minute. We must stop kicking the can down the road, proverbially, skipping along from crisis to crisis. Simply put, enough is enough. Let's start talking across party lines about how to fix our debt problems now, not the end of a deadline. We know that programs like Medicare and Social Security are on unsustainable footing. That's why a Democrat president and Republican House have both offered up reforms for these programs. So if we agree there's a problem, why must we wait until the next crisis to address it? We know that our tax code is outdated and that it's become too larded up with narrowly tailored provisions that benefit only a small number of special interests. That's why our House Ways and Means Chairman has met weekly with the Senate Finance Chairman to discuss how best to achieve a fairer, flatter tax code in a bipartisan way. If there is agreement here, then why are we looking to self-impose fiscal deadlines in hopes of getting a deal? I could go on, but I think the point is clear. Washington missed an opportunity during our most recent fiscal showdown. This resolution sends a message that ignoring our problems does not make them go away. It sends a message that we should not wait until the last minute, but should reach across the aisle to face these challenges now. And it sends a message that we take these issues very seriously because they bear directly on job creation, personal income levels, and our collective faith in America's enduring exceptionalism. I urge my colleagues to support this resolution of disapproval, and I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Indiana reserved.
Gentleman from Indiana is recognized.
So, Mr. Speaker, in closing, I'd just like to reiterate 5 key points. 1, our current national debt exceeds $17 trillion, an amount that's greater than our annual GDP, the size of our economy. 2, while I and so many others in my party agree with many of my colleagues across the aisle that risking default is irresponsible, it's just as irresponsible to ignore why our debt is so darn high and what it means for the future of our country. 3, we can and must work across partisan lines to avoid default in conjunction with a debt ceiling vote or a default related to a continued failure to address the largest drivers of our debt. And we must begin that work now, not at the last minute of the next self-imposed fiscal deadline. 4, those who've served here for decades have known for decades that our population was growing older, that healthcare costs were rising, and that our long-term fiscal trajectory was unsustainable, but nothing has happened. 5, this recognition that Washington continually misses opportunities to put our country on a path to fiscal health ought to be something on which we can all agree. I urge all my colleagues who want to see our country address our long-term challenges before it's too late to vote yes on this resolution of disapproval. I yield back the balance of my time.